Good morning. Welcome to another Curious Investors. It's a great day. It's awesome to join you all, and I'm running a little late today, but that's all good. I had uh, just a good run and lost track of time and forgot about you all. I appreciate your attention, and sometimes I lack that. But before we get started, Curious Investors, for your safety, the disclaimers. If you wish to remain unidentified from recording, please remove your name and face from the screen view. This broadcast is strictly our opinion. Stock investing includes risk, including fluctuating prices and loss of principal. Dividend payments are not guaranteed and may be reduced or eliminated at any time by the company without advance warning. Following information is not a recommendation. If you need recommendations, you need to talk to somebody specifically, and it's not about any particular securities. Any references to securities are for illustrative purposes only. Content provided at this event is for general information, not only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendation for any individual security. I think I've said that before. Any performance referenced in is historical, and there is no guarantee of any future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Any economic forecast set forth during the event may not develop as predicted, just as my weather forecast will not either. And there can be no guarantee that any strategy will be successful other than breathing as long as you can. These thoughts and opinions are those of Gimbal Financial and do not represent the views of LPL Financial. Any references to taxes or illustrations, seek advice from a tax professional before seeking any or acting on the ideas discussed. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Investment advice offered through Gimbal Financial, and we are registered investment advisors separate from LPL Financial. There you have it. We are live and ready to rock and roll this morning. I was motivated this morning by all the excitement in the market, and we follow and invest in some of the best research we know that's out there. Some of the best investors in history maybe are people we subscribe to their research. And so as we listen to them, we also are very cautious in this market. When one of the research writers we subscribe to was talking about somebody who's never invested before, their portfolio was up 189%, or the fact that his niece and nephew were calling him for investment advice and they're 12, 13 years old. Usually those are signs that the market is a little frothy, just like the top of your fancy Starbucks drink. And so when it's frothy, it all settles down and there's a good tendency that you might lose money out there. So if you are investing in these fast moving stocks, be careful. It's dangerous out there and you might not walk away with what you started with. The idea of getting into the market is good, and all the interest and curiosity out there is good as well. But the market is not a friendly foe. It is not one that will passively let you take your money and make a lot of money without punching you in the face. And so if you are having success out there, you might consider moving some of that money to a safe haven and just increasing your diligence in what you're doing out there, because when the market does turn, it turns very rapidly and it can be very dangerous to the capital that you have at risk. So not giving any specific advice, I'm just telling you, be careful out there. There was a fellow by the name of Bill Earl who was a philosopher, and Bill Earl said this quote, and I thought it was a great quote. It is, if your outgo exceeds your income, then your upkeep will be your downfall. And what he's saying, if you spend more than you make, then you're gonna have a problem. And no matter how I help or encourage you as curious investors, this is one principle that you just can't defy. You just can't defy the fact that if you spend more than you make, you're going to have problems. You're going to have challenges. And at the end of the day, those problems and challenges can really even be disruptive in relationships. And so that is a critical thing to take into account. And so I thought I would just basically show you how this works with just two little bowls. One is your income. I don't know if this thing does it backwards on the camera. I should probably figure that out before I got here. And the other is your outgo. So you got your income and your outgo. And if your outgo exceeds your income, then your upkeep's going to be your downflow, is what Earl said. But these ideas are just old. They're very basic old ideas, and it's not new information. It's not rocket science that you need to make more than you spend. The problem is most people don't. And because most people don't make more than they spend, they end up with car payments, credit card balances, mortgages, all these indebtedness that wear on their very soul, their very psyche. They cause conflict because we can't make enough this month to pay next month's bill and things like that. And so just taking back to the basics was my thought for this morning, since the markets have just kind of overwhelmed basic ideas for people in these last few weeks. So um, there are two types of people, I'm convinced. And if you're young and you're young married, you're young engaged, whatever your situation, if you were to draw like a arc and call that dynamic the spender spectrum, and on one side you put spender and the other side you put saver, and you've got that arc there, and you said, okay, where are we individually on this arc? Am I a spender, or am I a saver, or am I somewhere maybe near the middle of that, of those two of the spectrum? And so what I would do is just draw that arc and put spender and saver on one side, and then just sit down and ask one another where you are on that. And if you're real close to the edge of the spender side and you're just a diehard spender, you're probably going to have a lot of cash flow problems in life. And if you're a real strong saver, you're probably going to have a lot of relational problems because you don't have that generosity, or you're just not be fun to party with or whatever. But most people are somewhere on that spectrum. If you're an extreme spender, the money hits your hand and it's gone before you have anything to do it. If you're an extreme saver, you're just put money aside. You can't let any of it come out of your hands, and it's just going to be a stressful thing. But if there's two people that are marking the spectrum to see where we are in relation with one another, to have better communication with one another, suppose you're maybe a third of the way from the middle on each of those arcs, and that's each of you in the relationship. Then that span, if you drew just a straight line from one to the other, that span between where you each are on that spender spectrum is the span that has the possibility for conflict. And so the way you bridge that span is just intense communication. If you don't communicate and you have separate bank accounts and you're not telling one another what you're doing, then it can be really disruptive to a relationship. So that's the first thing I want to talk about, is there are spenders and there are savers. I'm of the belief that some of that is innate, that was born in you. I've just been a saver my entire life. I can remember back pre-teen years where I always had money, and my parents might have taught me that, but my siblings were just the opposite. They weren't on the same place on the spectrum that I was. And so I became a loan shark probably by the time I was 12 to them, charging daily interest and things like that. So you need to define that where you are and be honest with yourself. If you happen to be too extreme on either one of those spectrums, you're probably not going to make it all the way over the hoop to the other side. You just probably don't have that within you. Your personality isn't that way. But probably if you're two people on that spectrum and there's a difference between you, a variance between where you are, you can both compromise and come towards the middle and shorten that communication bridge that you need to make, and just make some compromises along the way. And so that's important to address, besides just looking at a budget, because I'm convinced that most of the time budgets don't work because you've got somebody in a relationship that's pretty far on the spender side, and consequently the disciplined person that's a saver is going to be judging the person that's a spender, and that's going to cause conflict. And being disciplined and being a saver doesn't make you right. It just makes you more disciplined at saving money. And the end game is not more money. We've been taught that a lot in our culture, that the end game is more money, but it is not. The end game is to make the most and have a fulfilled life and use your resources so that you might live more abundantly or more fulfilled. So what I would just do with these two bowls, I was thinking of a bucket, but I didn't think I'd get buckets in the screen. So I got these bowls that are the same size. So if if you're just trying to get a grip on your income and your outflow, you can just list the major expenses and then both down at the bottom, the minor expenses. You pull out your credit card statements, your Venmo, whatever you're using, and figure out where you're spending the money and then total up what you're making. Part of your outgo is going to be your taxes, right? I mean, the tax man cometh and taketh. You're also going to, if you've got retirement plans or other expenses that come out of your paycheck, just be aware of those so you know how much you actually have as income to spend as well. So when you review those on a monthly basis, you can find out where you're having problems. And if you're having, great success, well, get to you on that. Like the goal, I think, short term, the younger you are, is to try to get out of debt. The quicker you can get rid of consumer debt, that'd be credit cards, car loans, maybe longer term loans might be student loans. The quicker you can get those in your rearview mirror, the more you can begin to accumulate money for that future outflow that you might need when you can't work as much as you might be able to today. And so the monthly is a good place to look. And then a lot of times, because people don't realize the significance of their outflow, they always think they need more income. So that's why maybe people would be speculating in the stock market right now. Maybe you want a bigger house than you really can afford, so I need more income. Or maybe you want a shinier car than you can really afford, so you want more income. And you can get more income. There's no doubt that there's ways to get more income out there, particularly today. Today may be the most generous economy that I've lived through because of the different ways that you can get income. However, with more income comes more responsibility, more stress, more kind of disruptive forces to your emotions, and then your ability to have good relationships might be hindered by that. But so the income may not always be the problem. The outgo is a hard one to manage, particularly if you like shiny things and if you like new things, if you like big things. The outgo can be the temptation that can be very difficult to rein in, particularly if you happen to grow up in a household that maybe the household income is more than what your new income is. You might have become accustomed to some things in the outgo that aren't really within your means today. And that's just being honest with yourself. I think people who can be honest with themselves will have more opportunities for financial success, but even living life better, because if you think you can live like a king, but you're making a pauper's income, you're going to deceive yourself, and then you're going to have all kinds of economic challenges in the future. So that's what I have to say about that on the current thing. I would also just say, if you are able, you're taking your last breath and you looked back and you have this income and this outflow, I would think backwards about what do you want those to really look like. Because if you're driving your life based on your outgo, I need to have this big house, this shiny car, it's going to drive the time in your life to create the income, and it may not increase the relationships you have in your life. And so at the end of your life, your outgo is going to what really defines where your life was. I heard it a long time ago, and I don't even know if people use checkbooks anymore, but they said you could learn more about a person's life by looking at their checkbook register than anything else. Where you spend your money is really going to define who you're about, what you're about, who you are, and what's important to you. And so I think even to begin the cash flow things, you just need to sit down and define what you want your life to be about. Because as you begin to passionately define what you want your life to be about, you're going to be able to say no to some expenses that have nothing to do with what you want it to be about. I think on one of these Saturday morning shows I talked about, a friend of mine called me and asked me if I'd ever written my obituary. And at first I was a little offended by his thoughts. And then I thought what he was telling me, he's basically saying, if you go read an obituary, it will tell you what people perceived was important of the person who passed. And my friend was saying, why don't you write your own to define what's important about you going forward and just make that be what it is at the end. So defining what you want the world to know about your existence can have a big impact on how your finances work, because I'll turn 60 this year, and a big part of my existence has been about my family. And so where we've diverted resources have been to things to do with the build the relationships with the families. We've traveled a lot, and that travel expense became one of our big outflows over the years. But that outflow was something that was intentional and not like an impulse buy that you might get as you're checking out of the grocery store. And so as you're looking at this bucket or this bowl, I'd say define what your needs are and what your wants are, and be honest with yourself about needs and wants, because you probably just need shelter, clothing, and some food to get by short term. And your wants might be a lot bigger than what your needs are. And just be honest with what the difference in those are. I was reading a very successful investor from the 1920s or 30s, and his name is Gerald Loeb. And if you want to read writings of somebody that's pretty wise, he's probably worth reading. I think the book I was reading was Your Battle for Investment Survival. And what he said, it would be much better for this is near the end of his career, so I'm guessing he's 70 or 80 years old, but what he was saying is be better that while you're young, that you spend a lot of attention managing your outflow and thinking about your outgo on a long-term basis. And when you're older, think about your outgo on a short-term basis. Think about what are the things that you need in the short term, because you don't have as much time when you're young, when you're older, but when you're younger, you've got time to work on your side to help your finances work. I'd also, I mentioned it real quickly a while ago, but again, on the outgo, I would think about what are the impulses that are jumping up in your mind today versus the passions that might have long-term results, because those passions are places you should probably pour money into and pour resources, pour energy, pour your soul into, because they're going to create value and a lasting memory, not only for you, but those people around you. So there you have it. That's my thoughts to kind of divert a little bit today away from the market activity, because I think now is a good time to set some money on the sidelines if you were going to invest. But I think it's a good time to think about, why am I investing? Why am I trying to build up money? And the real reason is that at the end of your life, you're going to have had this bucket that you spent on something, and you would have had this bucket that you made some money doing something. But the question is why? How do these two things even integrate, and why do they integrate? And that question I can't answer for you. I can answer it for myself, but I encourage you to think about that. What does money mean to you, and what do you want to use it for as you go forward? Hope you guys are having a great week, and I appreciate you stopping by today and checking this out, and we will talk again next week.